And when I heard his story pitch, I was absolutely struck by it. It is heart-wrenching, it is fascinating, and in my conversations with Chris, I have just been absolutely in awe of the way that he has been able to transpose his skills as a critical care physician to a very unexpected environment that is a completely different world, yet in many ways the same as what we experience as doctors. So, Chris, take it away.
Thank you. So I'm Chris Carroll. I'm as Kara said, I'm a pediatric intensive care doctor, so I take care of critically ill children. I had dropped my daughter off at college and was driving home, and I got a call from a person who wanted me to see a patient. There was a patient, Kevin, who was 3 years old, had septic shock, was on norepinephrine and propofol. They wanted a second opinion. And I said, sure, I'll come by and see him. I'd never been to this facility before. Security guard directed me around back. It looked like your typical medical clinic, maybe albeit one that wasn't quite as well funded. But one difference was when I walked in the door, there was a real thick, earthy, musty smell when I walked back there. Led down the corridor through by several patient rooms. There was a room with what looked to be a sort of cat tower of some sort with, I think, a porcupine in it. There was another room with a large bird. I think it was an emu. And there was another room, the third room there was a tiger in the back corner. So I got to where Kevin was. It was a big room, it was about half the size of this room. In the middle of the floor, all by themselves, was a small aluminum crate or cage. It looked like a dog cage, only missing one side. And there, in a nest of blankets, propped up, was Kevin. Picture of Kevin. As you might have guessed, Kevin is not a human child. Kevin is a gorilla. He had been, at the time the Jacksonville Zoo was undergoing an outbreak of Shigella that had taken the lives of one of the other gorillas in the troop, and also the lives of two of the bonobos, that's another type of great ape. Kevin was pretty sick. He was dehydrated, anemic, had electrolyte disturbances, DIC, septic shock, obviously, and they wanted a second opinion from a human doctor who deals with this more often than they do. Meeting Kevin was both exciting and terrifying. You can kind of see there, he's got some big teeth. And the average, a gorilla, a 3-year-old gorilla is about as strong as your average 6-foot tall man who probably could break your arm if he wanted to. Fortunately, I don't think Kevin ever wanted to break my arm, so that's a good thing. And he's covered with what looked like this really coarse, thick black fur. But when you touched it, it was super soft. It was like touching a kitten's fur. It was really soft and surprising. So over the next couple of weeks, I got to spend time with the veterinarians helping care for Kevin. Gradually, I got less terrified of examining Kevin. There's a lot of similarities between humans and animals. The laboratory values are the same. The X-rays are very similar to human children. The antibiotics are similar. The treatments are similar. There were some differences. For example, he was hypoalbuminemic, and I said, well, why don't we give albumin? And they informed me, no, that's human albumin. You can't give that to a gorilla. They'll have a reaction. He had DIC, and so we were able to get some fresh frozen plasma, and I say fresh, it wasn't really fresh. It was 7 years old. We were able to get it from another zoo. It shipped on dry ice, 7-year-old fresh frozen plasma. But from what we could tell from the manufacturer, it was good up till 6 years, but we figured nobody had done a study comparing 6 to 7, so why not give it? We did, he did fine. He was anemic, and he couldn't really call up the Gorilla Red Cross to get blood. But typically when they get blood to donate to a gorilla, they get it from another member of the troop. But everybody in Kevin's troop was already sick, and so it would be risky to sedate them to get the blood. And plus it might have had an infected part of it, so we couldn't do that. But apparently in Atlanta, there's a gorilla that will voluntarily donate blood, so we were able to get it from him. What struck me the most about caring for Kevin and dealing with the veterinarians was how they treated their animals. Every animal was treated with a dignity and respect that was incredible. They were all treated, in every conversation, in every interaction, they were treated as full living beings. And I mean, of course they are full living beings, but I know that that this was jarring to me and humbling because, I know in medicine, we don't always treat our patients with dignity and respect. And I think that sometimes we, in our trying to be professional and are trying to hurry through the day, we dehumanize our patients. And I didn't see that with the veterinarians, and that left me feeling a little bit ashamed. So over the next couple weeks, Kevin did better. We were stabilizing. We got his shock under control. We got his dehydration, his electrolytes under control. Everything looked good. But you can't really send a gorilla back to a step-down unit. You have to kind of send them back out to the troop and hope that they will, take care of him when you send him back out there. At the time, the Jacksonville Zoo was the largest zoo. It had the largest troop of gorillas in the country. There were 10 gorillas, including Kevin's mom, Medini, who had already given birth and raised one child. Kevin was her second, so she's an experienced mother. Kevin's father, Lash, had passed away about a year earlier. He was one of two silverbacks that co-led the troop. But the other silverback, Rumpelstiltskin, or Rumpel, was still alive. And Rumpel was about a 400-pound, strong, terrifying-looking gorilla. More on Rumpel later. He was very smart. He was very patient, and he was a really good surrogate father to the younger gorillas in the troop, including Kevin. So we were very hopeful that when we sent him back, they would take good care of him. Fortunately, Kevin had been born at the zoo and raised by keepers and veterinarians who knew him his whole life. They knew all his habits. They loved him like their own child. So they were able to bottle feed him and hand feed him a little bit. And so we did that. We tanked him up with the plan to send him back out to the troop in the morning with the hope that they would take good care of him. It did not go as we hoped. The other gorillas, including Medini and Rumpel, ignored him. He sat alone on the ground in his habitat all day long. And there was nothing we could do at this point. We had to just hope that Kevin would even start to perk up, or the other gorillas would somehow take care of him. I got a call at about 5 o'clock the next morning. Kevin had been found unresponsive in the habitat, alone and covered in flies. So I raced into the zoo. I need to describe a little bit about how the zoo works. There is the habitat that you see when you go there. If you go to the zoo, you'll see a jungle-looking area where you can watch the external-facing part of the zoo. But then there's a backstage area that has some enrichment in it, but it's mostly a maze of cages and walkways and little lines on the ground to walk between so you don't get grabbed by the gorillas as you walk by the cages. They'll sometimes play Disney movies for the gorillas at night, apparently. But you go back there and it is unmistakably gorilla territory. It is dark and loud and damp and smelly and dusty. You had to put on these big knee-high boots to go back there and sanitize yourself before you went back there. And before I went back there, they warned me that Rumpel like to scare people. So just be aware that he might try to scare you. Okay, well, how does he like to scare people? Well, he likes to throw himself at the bars of the cages when you're in there. I go back through the backstage area, the maze of cages where the veterinarian who had called me, Megan, had already intubated Kevin. He had unfortunately arrested during intubation, but she gave him some epinephrine down his endotracheal tube, and he had returned spontaneous circulation. But he was unresponsive and limp. I started to do a neurologic exam, run through a typical brain death exam like we would do in a human. The cough, the gag, the corneals, the pupillary reflexes. At this point, Rumpel starts throwing himself at the bars of the cage. And I am, the area is small. I'm maybe a foot from the edge of the cage that he's throwing himself against. So it's just loud clanging, and I'm thinking, I really hope this holds. Are you sure this is actually shut? But he did it about 2 or 3 times, and then he stopped. I like to think that he realized we weren't trying to hurt Kevin, and that we were just trying to help. So Megan asked what we would do if this were a human child. I said, if this were a human child, we would leave him on the ventilator for a few days and see what recovered. I said I expect that he had had a significant hypoxic ischemic event during the period of time before we found him, and that probably caused some significant brain damage. And that he might have some recovery, but if this were a human child, I would expect that he would need some technology dependence, and that a trach or a G-tube or something. That, of course, is not possible on a gorilla. Megan called the head of the zoo and explained the situation. And we sat there on the floor, the damp floor, taking turns bagging Kevin while we waited for her to arrive. When the head of the zoo arrived, we explained the situation, made the decision to take him off the ventilator, and pulled the breathing tube out. By this point, we had had some blankets on the floor, and we left Kevin alone on the blankets so the other gorillas could see him. Walked out, could hear the gorillas crying and wailing behind us as we left, and realized that he was gone. I hung around the zoo for rounds the next morning. The volunteers and the other veterinarians came in and paid their respects. That emu that I'd seen before apparently was still causing trouble. This time she was stressed because they were putting up Halloween decorations around her enclosure, and they decided to put her on some gabapentin to calm her down. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from Danny Bedenici, who's a veterinarian at Tufts, who was looking for a pediatric intensivist to come to a conference they were putting together on veterinary ARDS. And I asked her if she'd gotten my name from these vets that I knew in Jacksonville, but apparently it was a coincidence that she called me. She had just seen my work and saw that I lived in Florida where the conference was, so figured I could just drive. And so they called me, and I went to the conference and met those vets, and they were here at Chest teaching about what we can learn from animals and how that can improve our care of human diseases. I think the experience with Kevin fundamentally changed me as a person. I think later that year I bought a camera, and started taking pictures of animals around my house in Florida. Here's a picture of a hummingbird. Upside down. There you go. Now you can see it. Later that year, we went. Later this spring, we went to the Galapagos, and I got to really see nature untouched by humans. Here's some seals you could see. You could stand there all day and take pictures of these seals or birds. Take a couple hundred pictures, and they wouldn't care. But I did. But The experience really led me to believe that veterinarians and human doctors have a lot to learn from each other, and that the practice of medicine extends beyond humans. I'm going to close with the words from the late Jane Goodall, who I think said it best. We are all interconnected. Animals, people, our environment. When nature suffers, we suffer. And when nature flourishes, we flourish. Thank you.